Hi everybody. I just wanted to change the lighting a little bit. It was getting a little dark outside. So hopefully this is just a little bit better. But now, continuing with our online portion of the class, your tests and quizzes. If you're not being graded on your homework, how are you being graded from the in-class portion? And that's how it's going to be. It's going to be your tests and quizzes. Have at least 3 tests, typically 3, sometimes 4 quizzes in Calc II, and then we have our final exam. Now, when I make tests, I still think of the in-class exams. When I make a test in class, for Calc II, they're typically 7 to 80 minutes long. For the quizzes, they're typically about 25 to 45 minutes long. When I make your quizzes for the online portion, I'm basically just modifying the same tests and quizzes. But for online, I'm going to give you over 24 hours to submit all of these graded items. So, let's stay on that point for just a couple of moments, because you just finished hearing me say that I'm not going to collect and grade homework, and now I'm going to give you over 24 hours to submit your tests and quizzes. So now, for some people who think this might allow them to kind of circumvent, maybe try and let this class sit on the back burner and then they could just watch a whole bunch of videos while they're handing in their test, I'm telling you right now, that's not going to work. This class is too difficult. There's too much material you have to remember from Calculus 1. There's too many basics that need practice, repetition, your algebra, your factoring, your solving equations, the basics with trig functions. Once we get into the log and exponential functions, it's just too much to think you're just going to try and get everything done in a day and expect to have good results. So, like I was saying before, you really want to make sure you're sticking with the schedule. You want to have something in mind, you want to keep working, you still want to study for your tests and quizzes as you would in a regular in-person setting, but now here's where you can take advantage. I would strongly suggest you take that, for a test about an hour and a half, for a quiz under an hour, but something like that, to just sit and work on it. Do your best, get everything done, but leave yourself enough time that if there were questions that you were still unsure, maybe there was a section that you knew was a little tough for you, and you tried to do some studying, and now you see the exact question that's coming up on that, now you can go back. Now you can go back, hit your notes, follow a little bit of extra work from a problem, go rewatch a video if necessary. That's the way to make that time frame work. There's a few other reasons, allowing for little computer problems if submission issues that come in. There's a few reasons why I do that, but it really is to give you that advantage to get your best effort, but then to still have some time to go back and look some things over. Maybe it's, redoing a problem or two. You don't want to go too crazy and doubt yourself and throw it all out and start from scratch. But maybe again, you do recognize something's a little off on this problem. Let me try it again, see if I get the same result by doing it a second time. So that's how it's going to go. That's how your tests will be distributed through email and posted on Blackboard. How are you going to hand them back to me? How do you submit them to me? Again, through email. I'm not going to do anything extra. There's not going to be a Blackboard test. You're not going to have that extra, restricted window or anything like that. What I need from you, I do need to see work. I can't just take an email with answers, especially when we get to the end of the class. And I'll even explain this a little more in the syllabus. There needs to be work. At the end of our class, so many of the answers are either convergent or divergent, and that's like saying true or false. Without having the work to go with it, the answer by itself is pretty much worthless. So, I'm going to need to see work. So math, unfortunately, is not the most friendly when it comes to people I'll just type it up on my computer and send it in an email that way. So I would recommend a couple of things. Oh, I should have mentioned this. You can print as much or as little as you want in this class. Again, your syllabus that we'll get to in a few minutes, the tests that I send to you, you could just, have your test open on your computer and just write your work on the side while your test is open. You don't have to print it. You technically don't need a printer at all for this class. But if you'd rather print it so you have the problem right there and you work right underneath it, that's fine. But whatever the case is, and same thing with my notes, we'll talk a little bit more about note taking in a little while. But for the tests, you need to give me something that I could follow, and I need to see your work as well. So what I would strongly recommend is some sort of a scanner that can convert your work into a PDF. So that you could write, again, whether you're writing on the test or you're just using fresh paper and you're just writing your problems, problem number 1 and you get right to work, problem number 2 and you get right to work, to scan this. If you have a printer, some of them have a built-in scanner, that might work. If you have a smartphone, there are a lot of apps, and that's one I want to talk about right here. There is an app called TurboScan. TurboScan. It is a free app in the App Store. It's what I use. When I give you your notes, once we do our videos for instructional material, I'm working at my desk, the camera's overhead, so you'll hear me, but you'll just see my hand and my notes working. And after I finish that, you of course get the video, but then I scan my notes so that you have a copy of that as well. And for TurboScan, it actually does a really nice job of like sensing borders and framing properly. So it happens to be a very nice app, and it also converts it to a PDF file, and that works very well and is very friendly, being sent, uploaded and downloaded and being sent through email. So that's what I would recommend. It's not the only option. Last semester, some people have some nice little devices on their tablets. They can open up a Word document, but then use a pointer and actually write, and the computer can record that. That also works very well. I have no problems with that at all. Some people, I mean, again, if you have a phone, you certainly have a camera to go with it, so you could take photos and send me those. That is definitely my least favorite option, and that's typically where most of the trouble comes up. Photos ideally will be taken and sent as a JPEG, and JPEGs are fairly friendly, but still, even if you have a test, or maybe you used a lot of pages when you were going through putting your papers, putting your test together. Again, to be quite honest, Calc II, these problems can be pretty lengthy. So just recognizing that if you're sending a lot of pictures, you can easily overwhelm an email. Depends on exactly the size and the format. Sometimes about 4 or 5 pictures, and you may think you've sent an email, but it just gets bounced back because it has too much data inside of it. Sometimes it can be more pictures. Sometimes your phone will convert a JPEG into an HEIC file. I have an Apple computer at home. My Apple computer cannot open HEIC files. So if you're really working on photos, you have another option. You can convert your photos to a PDF using this little option. It's called, Edit with Preview option. Okay, so you can convert that by clicking this option, and then that will be one of your choices. Convert into a PDF. So a PDF, again, is my most preferred option. When we get close to our first quiz and test, we'll certainly talk about this again. If you have any concerns, we can certainly do a little trial run here and there beforehand just to make sure things are working. And to be honest, we had no real problems with this last semester, but I do really prefer the PDFs if that is possible for you. And again, any other questions or concerns, certainly just let me know. Okay, so that's our tests and quizzes, and overall gives us a fairly good sense as far as what the online aspect of this class is going to be like. You set your schedule, you follow along with my emails, go through the videos, go through the homework, send questions, and again, we'll just keep going back and forth. And like I said, last semester, we had a little bit of an advantage in that we did have a month and a half in person before switching into the online version. So that gave students a little more of a chance to get to know me. They already had a test and a quiz to have a sense of what I'm looking for. So we're starting right off the bat in this online mode, but I really think we'll be okay. As long as you're planning ahead, and if problems come up, you let me know and we work on it, we won't have any real issues. Okay, so now, sticking with the idea that this is an online class, let's talk a little bit about the pros and cons of in-person versus online. For me personally, I do really prefer an in-person class. I really like the atmosphere of being in the classroom, getting to know a new group of students, having that back and forth. And on top of that, I really am a big believer in motivation and motivational strategies. And when I'm in person, I can get a feel for the class, for that an overall general sense. Some people do a little bit better with a little more encouragement. Other people need a little bit more of a push to get them to push themselves a little harder. But even more so on a day-to-day basis, some days we hit those points during, like midterms, people are a little down. Energy is down. You've had a lot going on. So sometimes to try and take a day where we take it a little bit easier, but then to recognize other days where we have good energy. Let's take it a little further. Let's push it a little harder. So unfortunately, those are the little things we miss. However, most of those things are not really that big of a problem. When it comes to my emails, I've really put a lot of encouragement in there. I really want you to stay on track, and I will put a lot of the reminders if you're falling behind, how you can act, what we have coming up. And again, really trying to encourage you to realize this is a tough class. It's good to have that reinforcement that, okay, we've made it this far. We still have a long way to go, but to at least have that moment to acknowledge and recognize that, yeah, we're doing well, and to keep it up. So I still make sure I try and include that. In person, there's a lot of back and forth as we have class. People ask and answer questions. Well, in the videos, that's slightly different. But you'll notice once we start getting into the instructional videos, I really anticipate questions. I first go through a whole big section of this is what we need to do, and this is the idea, the theorem, the technique, whatever it is that we're trying to work on. But then almost as soon as we finish a problem, to point out, here's some little misunderstandings. Make sure if you're having this thought, maybe you've misunderstood this piece, this is a simpler problem, make sure you try the harder one to understand that you're not just getting lucky. I'll still make those notes. But now, when we're in class, sometimes someone asks a good question and you don't even realize, wow, I was gonna have that question, I didn't have it yet, and that is helpful. So we don't quite have that, but again, I still share that information. You actually have more freedom and availability to ask questions in this online setting. In class, sometimes you may feel a little oh, I missed something, but that's because, maybe I was just a little tired, or maybe I was just slightly distracted for a moment, and you maybe feel embarrassed and don't want to ask. Well, now with the online setup, at any point, you're in the middle of a video, you could pause it and say, instructor, Mr. Sponza, at the 10-minute, 40-second mark, when you start doing that problem, I'm unclear why you did blank. Or, I really could use a little more explanation for this particular concept that you address at this point in the video, or on this page in the notes. Or just, other problems I would like to go over this problem from the homework. You send me your work and ask me, I'm missing something because I'm not getting the right answer in the back of the book. So again, there's a lot of different possibilities. And with this online format, in a lot of ways, it gives you a chance for more questions. When people start asking questions, and especially if there's any kind of a common theme, I always want to share that with the class. Because like I said, I do think that can be productive. There are a few other little aspects that we miss. There's a lot of really interesting math history. Calculus especially, boy, there's a lot of good stuff that happened that got us to where we are here. You talk about people like Isaac Newton, one of the most recognized names in all of mathematics. He's right at the heart of so much, but there's just so much more. I may mention a little bit of that in the videos, but for the most part, I really try and stay on point in the videos, giving you exactly what you need. What is the material? What's the understanding you should be trying to get? What are the techniques? What are the key words? What are the directions we're looking for? I really try and stay mostly focused on that, so that way you're very clear what you have to be able to do. But certainly, again, curiosity, you may still want to ask, and I give you full permission to certainly ask. If I do open a little bit of a door and you want to know more, feel free, email me, let me know. Same thing with applications. This class, we take mostly a theoretical approach to Calculus II. Now, saying that without having taken the class, that's not exactly clear what I mean by that. But as we get a little further into syllabus, we'll point out there's a wide variety of people who end up in Calculus II because it really serves as a foundation for so much of what we do in our everyday world. Business, logistics, health science, chemistry, physics, engineering, pure math. I mean, it just really, we can keep going on and on and on. So it really serves a lot of purposes. So most of what we do in the class is we stick with the theoretical, which is in some ways the more abstract point of view with mathematics, but we do some discussion of application. Not a lot. For those of you, most of you have gone through Calculus 1, so you've seen that. You've seen a couple of sections of application, and I know I tell my Calc 1 students, every time we get to an application section, we can spend a month going through all the different examples and seeing all the different nuances of how calculus is involved in all those different areas I mentioned a moment ago, but we're not going to. Okay, we get to those sections and we go through those sections in basically a day, just like we do pretty much any of the other sections. So when we do get to the application sections, we typically stick with a few core problems to try and, serve as a template for something that you can look at as kind of a background of what to look at, and any problem I would give you on a test or quiz would have some similarity that you could use that previous template to work through that problem. Even in this class, we could probably get a little bit less of the application than we do in Calc 1. However, I still like to mention where those applications come up and how it gets used. I think when we are working in such an abstract place where it's all just Y's and X's and graphs, sometimes people can get a little frustrated, like, why? What's the purpose? Why do we care? So I do like to remind you why we do care, again, how it is really used. And even if it's not something that you directly would use in your field, how it's still related to your field, to what your major, what you happen to be pursuing. So, like I said, those often in class, we might get some good questions that get us to extend those conversations. I don't automatically do those in the videos, but again, if you're ever interested, I implore you, I open you, I welcome you to ask me those questions, and I'll be happy to discuss it more. Okay, so what are we doing? Yes. Oh, another quick thing I should mention, I'm also the chairman of the Student Mentoring Committee for the Math and Computer Science Department. Typically in an in-person semester, I would be advertising a lot of different events that we have going on, events for promoting undergraduate research. Sometimes it's something like a new particular field, like data science is a hot topic. The computer science people are doing a lot more to go with that. Sometimes it's a little bit more of a math history talk, a study skills talk. So in a regular semester, we have a lot of events. I don't see that really happening in an online format. But the second purpose for this committee is to be there for your questions. And it's not just you, my students, it's you, any student at Queensborough. If you have questions about your particular math classes, what it leads to as a follow-up math class, if you have questions about, your next class, about an application question, transfer, major, choice of career. There really are a lot of different things that we can help with. I may not know the answer to everything, but I certainly could reach out, maybe put you in contact with someone, try and get you an answer. I mean, in general information, I'm always going to try and give you any information on what's going on campus. Are they going to open up the library? Is there anything new? Are there the access, the help room, anything like that? I try and share that information when it becomes available. Last semester, the Help Center was only available through online appointment. Maybe they'll be in person, I can't say, but I will let you know that stuff as soon as I do. But again, any of these questions, for you or for any of your colleagues, classmates, certainly feel free to email. I'd be happy to try and help. Okay, so again, overall, a lot of different aspects, in person versus online, but I hope you realize online still offers you a lot of luxury and freedom to make your own schedule. It doesn't make the class easier, but it allows you to operate more on your own schedule. So when you have those nights, again, if we were meeting in person 8:10 to 10:30 at night, we would talk a lot about being tired at the end of the day, how to respond, how to keep yourself motivated, how to get through 2+ hours of a hard class that late in the day. It's quite a chore, but with online that you have freedom to set up your own schedule, to work through things at your own pace, go through the videos, get through the homework, ask questions, really is very friendly in a lot of ways. Other situations, again, you know, sometimes if you do miss a class in a regular scenario, I recommend the idea of having a friend, someone you could talk to, get a basic idea, get some notes from, so that way you're not too lost when you come back to class. Well, now you've got the videos. If you really do have a couple of days you're not feeling well, you just get to the videos a little bit later. Just don't forget to get to them. You know, we'll talk a little bit more about my notes, how to take advantage, but overall, you need to have a schedule, you need to plan, you need to have some flexibility. For some people, things may start off a little bit easier, but this class is tough. And for some people, it's just tough right off the bat and it's hard the whole way through. Other people feel that it just keeps increasing little bits as we go along, so that they need to change their schedule a little bit. And again, we'll talk more about that as we go through the syllabus and as we get through a few more notes. So that wraps up the general kind of online and the details of the class and our pros and cons. Now let's start talking about our syllabi. Now, I do not actually have printed out versions, so these are actually Calc I syllabi, but you have two versions attached. You have your official department, looks like this, except of course it's 442 for Calc II, not 441. And then your second one is a little extra info sheet from me. So I have not been able to get to campus to do some printing for myself, so I have them on my computer. So let's start off with the course department syllabus. Okay? So again, this is Calculus II. The prerequisite is completing Calculus I, 441 with a C or better, or by placement. Some people have taken AP or just for a variety of reasons, just placed directly into Calc II. But for most everybody else, you've taken Calc I and at least a C or better. I want to stop here for one quick moment. I've already received a few emails from people who are concerned that last semester with the switch to online instruction, that they don't feel their instruction in Calc I or their background from Calc I is where it should be. Or at least they're concerned maybe it's not where it should be. I'm really going to try and be very open with that. We're working with that. You'll notice once we get into actual material, we start fairly slow here. Today, I mean, this is all we're doing for day number 1. This, going through the review video, I already sent you guys the review packet from Calc I. I would strongly recommend going through that packet. And even going through that packet, there were 5 parts. Part 1 was taking derivatives, Part 2 was solving integrals. Those have to be your top priority. The additional 3 parts, I'll mention a few aspects of that, a little bit more of the understanding to remember from Calc I, and that'll come up in the review video as well. But you really want to get back and remember your basics for derivatives and antiderivatives. That is huge. So, I'll make some points in the review video, and that's partially why I wanted to get this out a little early. But even if you're just watching this on day 1 of the class, even going into next week, we still have a little more review and we still start a little slow. So you do have some time to go back, get that review packet, crack open the notes from Calc I. I mean, I have videos from last semester from Calc I. QCC Sponza, if you're having trouble with antiderivatives, section 3.9 gives you the basics. Section, I believe it's 4.4, talks about U substitutions. There's a few other videos in between, more of what antiderivatives, the connection to integrals, what they do, but those are the 2 big ones for techniques. Unfortunately, the shortcuts with derivatives, that comes up in the beginning of chapter 2. I believe it's 2.2 is the basic shortcuts. Then you get like the trig functions in 2.3, product and quotient rule in 2.4, chain rule in 2.5. It's something like that. But unfortunately, we had already completed those sections last semester in person. So I don't have videos for those, but those are the sections in your book if you want to go back and look over to get a little extra assistance. So again, if you're concerned, don't be too concerned, but make sure you're getting through the review. And even right off the bat with the review, ask questions. You don't need to get every answer before we go along. There's always going to be more reminders. Review will always be a constant part of this class regardless. But again, this is a good way to get started on the right foot. Get into the review pack, start remembering. You'll see as soon as I start my review video, the F prime chart. Derivatives from F to F prime, antis the other way, and getting used to going back and forth on that chart. Okay, hours. This class, again, technically our hours are 8:10 to 10:30, but 2 days a week, Monday and Wednesday. So that basically breaks down into 4 class hours and 1 resuscitation hour. It's 5 hours a week. And when we talk about a college classroom, there's a good general rule to follow. For every 1 hour of time spent in the classroom, you should be spending 1 to 3 hours outside, doing homework, reviewing, studying. That's serious, everybody. And especially when we get to Calc II. I just finished recording a video for my Calc I students, and there are some students who Calc I just comes a little more naturally to. They understand it a little bit better, they have a little bit of a better background. Calc II, typically, even if you took AP Calculus, you haven't seen too much of this, and just the overall nature of it, it's longer. Problems are a little bit harder. Derivatives in Calc I are a lot more set in stone. You have very clear-cut rules to follow. Antiderivatives, we have general guidelines, but nothing is completely set in stone the way it seemed to be in Calc I with derivatives. So it's just, there's a lot of little nuance to the class, and it relies on more background. I tell my Calc I students, it takes this much trig to do well in Calc I, this much trig to get an A in Calc I. In Calc II, it takes this much trig to pass Calc II. It takes this much trig to get an A in Calc II. So what is this? Again, we'll talk about that in the review. A huge part of it is the derivatives of the trig functions. But there's more than that. We do need some identities. We're going to need to manipulate our trig functions using different trig identities. We're going to need to remember trig facts, SOHCAHTOA, right triangle trig. We're going to need to know our basic trig reference angles. What are the values for sine and cosine at, and remember, there is no degrees in calculus, so instead of 30, 45, and 60 degrees, pi over 6, pi over 4, pi over 3 radians. So again, we'll get more of those reminders and point you on the right track if you are a little shaky. If you feel a little shaky with your trig, don't worry too much. Again, the derivatives are definitely the first part. Here's another little added bonus of being online. Things that I would expect you to absolutely have memorized for an in-person exam, well, you're taking your quizzes and exams at home. So as long as you know where to look, if you forget, well, wait, is sine the opposite over the hypotenuse or the adjacent over the hypotenuse? Well, you could look it up, an advantage that you would not have in an in-person class. So especially this semester, you get a little more freedom on that. But I also want you to realize, for a lot of people, this is where they really start to understand how trig works. They've used it before. They've used their calculator. They've done some basic right triangles and things. And maybe if you've got a little bit of a physics background, you've seen a little bit more. But for the basic aspect of the trig functions as functions, and treating them as algebraically manipulated functions, this is where a lot of people get a lot of that practice. So again, just another reason why you have to do homework. Too much going on and just say, oh, I saw it once. You're going to need to get some of your own practice doing it, and that's going to come from the book, from doing your homework. Okay, so now back to the hours again. So 5 hours in class, 5 to 15 outside. But again, the way we're doing this, that really boils down to basically 10 to 20 hours per week. That's what you should be thinking about allocating to give yourself a real good shot at doing well in this class. But again, that may change. Maybe you feel good in the beginning, and maybe you're even a little under 10 hours, but as we go further along, you certainly have to make sure you're adjusting as necessary. When it comes to grades, and we will talk about that in another few minutes as well, make sure you're on track with what you want. And if your tests and quizzes aren't going the way you want them to, let's talk. Send me an email. Let's talk. Let's see what's not quite working for you and get back on track. Just don't wait too long. If you're getting C's the entire semester and then we're getting ready for the final and you say, hey, professor, I want an A, well, that's too late. It's not going to happen. I mean, especially an A. You know, Calc II, tough class. I don't say that to scare people. You got through Calc 1, that definitely means you're capable of getting through Calc 2. And that doesn't mean you have to sacrifice a grade. It doesn't mean only people who got A's in Calc 1 can get A's in Calc 2. That's not true at all. It doesn't mean if you got a B plus in Calc 1, you should expect a B or a B minus in Calc 2. Again, anything can happen. It's about making the adjustments. So if you're getting your grades and you're happy, keep doing what you're doing. If they start to slide, you pick it up a little bit. That's all. If you're not happy, well, let's talk and let's automatically use that. Do more homework, get back to the notes more, review more, and thinking about spending time. Again, those 10 to 20 hours a week. Let's talk about duration versus frequency. People who tell me, well, I'm going to study in one big 4-hour time block. It just doesn't work. And that's not just math, that's pretty much any subject. Our brain really can only take so much. So you really should try and plan. Again, sometimes circumstances force us to try and do some of that. But for the main overall, day-to-day, week-to-week routine of the semester, we should really plan on avoiding that. And that we should try and think about, well, if we can maintain that focus for about an hour and a half per session, let's try and break that up. And instead of doing 2 big 4-hour sessions, let's do 5 hour-and-a-half long sessions. Break it up. Spread it out throughout the week, okay? Some people, they want to do a whole big crunch, and then they don't even realize how exhausted their brain is getting, that as they keep working, that they're losing stuff that they understood earlier as they try and work into other new material. It doesn't quite happen that way when you take your time and break it down. Work for an hour. Doesn't mean you have to do separate days. Work for an hour. Go to have a snack, have a cup of coffee, have a bite to eat, take a little relaxation, then come back and put in another hour. That could be a very effective way so that you don't overburden yourself and that you could keep everything. Not just have it there for a quick moment, but get it there and get it to stay there. Okay, another quick thing. Again, especially for some people, this class is technically Monday and Wednesday, so some people still like to try and use that to base their schedule. So let's say you do set yourself up. You start a little earlier in the day on Wednesday, you watch the videos, you feel good, you get to the homework later on Wednesday night, you finish it, you feel good, and now you feel great. Everything, you're understanding, things are clicking, but now you don't look at your notes. You don't do anything math-wise, and you're off. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You come back Monday, 5 days later. It's a good bet. No matter how well you understood everything on Wednesday, by the time you come back to it on Monday, you probably forgot a lot of it. So even if you do have that good feeling, when I say going back and studying, that doesn't mean you have to always do fresh problems. It might just be taking 20 minutes to just flip through your notes a little bit. Remind yourself, what are the techniques we've been looking at? What are the theorems that we've been studying? What are the directions? It's a huge part in a math class. What are the directions that go with a particular section? People very often get in bad habits of just doing what seems natural. And it's like, how do I know what to do in the problem? Well, the directions are telling you what to do. So that certainly is a worthwhile thing. So even if you finished everything well Wednesday night, and then maybe Friday you took 20 minutes, and then Sunday you took another 20 minutes, and now when you come back to the video and Monday's material, now you're sharp and ready to go. And there's no running back to try and remember where we left off. You're ready, set, just ready to move on and learn more. Okay, the course description you can read. A lot of fancy terms. I'm not even going to bother reading them off. By the time we finish the semester, everything there will make sense. The different integration techniques, infinite series, things of that nature. It's not that bad. Calc 1 has more description in it. The curricula for which this course is required, well, it's required for anybody looking in math and science and any engineering science. But to be honest, that's really not everybody. That's everybody who needs this class right now to get their degree from Queensborough. But there's still a good number of people who are taking this class for, they're going into a business program, but they still need Calc II, whether it's, economics, advertising, marketing. Not all programs do, but some do. So business, logistics, the health fields, there's just really, again, so many people that end up needing Calc II. Why? Why are you here? Why do so many of these majors have you take Calc II? Well, in Calc 1, I talk a little bit about how calculus has so many pieces underlying in these areas. Even if you won't be using them every day in your day-to-day life, if you're working in these fields, they're still there. Somebody had to think of them. Somebody had to use them. Calc 2 is not quite to that same extent. Calc 2 is more the thinking, the discipline. As I keep suggesting, this is a tough class. And all those majors I mentioned, they know that. And this is almost a measuring stick to them. If you can do this, getting through a class of this nature, that lets them know that you've got the critical thinking, the analytical reasoning that they want to be a nurse, a doctor, a economist, a computer science person, any of those things. Even if you're not using these direct pieces, the thinking that goes with them, the logic, the reason. Because when you can apply these ideas in such an abstract setting as you'll see, it becomes so much easier to apply logic and critical thinking to things that are in your grasp, that you can get your hands on. So even in other classes, if you're putting together a history paper or an English paper, you finish a class like this, you're a lot more logical in how you lay out your arguments. Well, okay, well, I want to start talking about this guy, but then he is a direct descendant, he followed, and this guy's ideas led to this being developed. It creates a very natural flow, as opposed to some of the circular writing that people have a bad habit, where you're kind of throwing little bits of ideas, but you're losing a lot of that sense of flow. And again, the logic really helps. I mean, not to mention, we're going to be doing a lot of, again, basics of math, factoring, solving equations. Our arithmetic is not that difficult. So just by doing those things more readily, just makes us sharper thinkers. It's mental exercise, gets the brain a little stronger, a little more sharp, ready to go. Okay, so I already, the general education objectives, using analytical and deductive reasoning to apply the concepts and methodologies to answer questions in mathematics, blah, blah, blah. It's exactly what I'm talking about. The course objectives, expected student learning outcomes, all those things. They're all just, again, it's every math class. Critical thinking, analytical reasoning is the name of the game, especially in a tough class like Calc 2. Okay, next is our textbook. I unfortunately do not have my textbook at home. I have to get to campus at some point, but this is it. 8th edition of Stewart. It's the same book you used for Calc 1 last semester. Okay, nothing new. Your textbook, certainly all of your homework and anything else like that comes from your textbook, all posted from there, but more than just your homework. Obviously, I basically give you the odd homework problems, so you have the answers to the odd problems in the back of the book. But more than just your homework. Your homework is a super important piece of why you need your textbook. And I hope I've sufficiently explained why it's necessary, no matter how well you understand the ideas. Understanding is one part, but then being able to apply it and do it yourself. Not making the little mistakes, remembering all those little basics and backgrounds, not making a mistake on step 2, which is causing you bigger problems when you get to step 6, step 7, because these problems can get pretty lengthy sometimes too. All that is going to come from practice, which comes from the homework. And how much homework should you do? I should have mentioned this much earlier. You should be doing most of it. If you don't get it all, that's okay, but you should be trying most of it. Like most books I hope you're familiar with, math books tend to get harder as you get deeper into the homework section. So your first couple of homework problems are typically just trying to get, some basics, some reminders, what's going on, some of the more basic examples. Then you get a little harder, and then you typically at the end, most homework sections have a few challenge problems. I try not to overwhelm you, but I almost always throw like one of those in. You certainly shouldn't worry about that. It's good to think about, but you shouldn't give yourself a hard time if you're not solving it. But you should be able to solve about 75% of the homework that I give. If you're having problems and you're not getting quite that much, we should talk. Maybe there's a little mistake you keep making. Maybe there's a little misunderstanding that you're having. But if you're getting at least 75% right, you're on good track. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. But outside of homework, you should be reading your book, okay? We're really at a point where Not that I expect you to read and get full understanding from the textbook, but Stewart is a good author. Unlike some authors who just, here are facts, here's a technique, here's how you do it, and that's that, you go do it yourself. Stewart, like I try and do in the videos, he tries to give you motivation. Where are we going? What are we working towards? How do we get there? So it's not just this is how you do it, go and do it, trying to give you the understanding of why we care and how we're getting to that end game. And again, for some people, that motivation really, really helps a lot in their understanding and making those connections in the material. And now I've seen two successful ways to read the book. Some people like to read it before we get to that section with the videos or before we would get to it in an in-class setting. They may not get a lot of understanding, but at least they're seeing some terms, they're seeing some problems, and then when they come to class or watch the video, then they get their understanding. Their aha moment comes faster. Like, oh, that's where the author is going. That's what he's trying to do. That's what that set of directions means. So for some people, that really works well, so they like that reading in advance. But for other people, it's kind of the complete opposite. They'd much, much rather have that in person. Let me introduce the topics, show them everything that's necessary, and then the book, they could read over a little bit and get a little reinforcement from there. And that's a part of their study. Just to see it again, like, okay, yep, I remember. That's the idea. That's what we're trying to do. Oh, here are some problems. And that's the last thing I want to mention about the book. The example problems in the book are very good. My examples that I do when we do our notes and everything, I really, really try and make sure I'm not doing the same or even sometimes too similar, so that way you have different examples to look at in the book. So sometimes, just a little extra reinforcement, examples help. If you're a little stuck in the homework, pretty much every different set of directions in the homework, if you just flip back a few pages in the book, there will be an example that has those same directions. So again, sometimes you get a little off track, maybe you took a couple of days off, or just whatever the case may be, that can be a very helpful way to get back on track with getting some homework and making progress. But still, everything I keep saying still relies on you sticking to a schedule. If you wait too long, no matter how strong you can focus and how much time you can put in, if you try and email me questions from 20 sections all at once, you're just not going to have time to process everything. But as we're going along, you really can take that time. I'm not understanding this homework. Okay, we have our back and forth, and now you can move forward. So just really, really keep that schedule in mind. Next item on the syllabus talks about calculators. Scientific or graphing calculator is required. It's not like this is the only graphing calculator. This is a TI-84, 84 plus graphing calculator. This is a TI-30 scientific calculator. There's nothing special about Texas Instruments. These are just the calculators I have. But you do need a calculator. Not a lot. There's a few sections, particularly when we get to logs and exponentials. There's one word problem section where we're going to want the calculator to know what is e to the 4.3 power to get an answer to answer this problem. And most of the rest of a math class, if the answer is the square root of 2, well, we'd rather you leave the answer as the square root of 2, not put that in a calculator and get a non-terminating, non-repeating decimal 1.414, blah, 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 and then you automatically round off. We'd rather that be the square root of 2. But again, for those few sections, when we're in an application section, and I say, and how many weeks does it take for Billy to earn this particular amount of money? And if the answer is the square root of 2 weeks, well, we'd rather convert that and say, okay, that's about 1.4 weeks. So context matters, and that's partially why I'm saying you're not going to need these for a lot, but you're going to need these for a couple of places. The graphing calculator can be helpful in a lot of different spots because, again, the graphing functions. As we talk about knowing some of your background, the connections between equations and graph. Y equal x squared, our basic parabola with vertex at the origin. Hopefully that's one we remember. But if we forget that, again, graphing calculator can help. There are other graphing applications and tools, but again, just to realize a few possibilities. They also have a note about a computer algebra systems are not allowed. We can't, but that's part of like when I talk about when you give your exams, you're gonna have to show me work. So that way I can see you're actually solving, not just typing a problem and getting an answer, whether it's through a computer algebra system or through some other online tool. Okay. So, how are you going to be graded? How do I actually evaluate you? 60% tests and quizzes. That first 60%, examinations, assignments, and classroom performance, where that comes from are your tests and quizzes. 3 tests, at least 3 quizzes, sometimes 4, and once we get a little further onto the syllabus, I'll point out where some of those tests and quizzes, where they come up. And all you do for your tests and quizzes, points earned divided by points possible. If you get a 10 out of 20 on a quiz, that's not good, that's a 50%. But then if you get a 90 out of 100 on a test, that's good, that's an A. That adds up to 100 out of 120, which is roughly about an 83%. So the number of points, all tests will be out of 100, but quizzes will vary. The heavier point total on a quiz, the more it weighs. But for any point, when I talk about where do you stand, how are you doing, that's all it takes. Points earned divided by points possible. Okay. The second part is MAPLE. 10% of our grade is supposed to come from MAPLE lab assignments. And if we were actually meeting in person, we would have a part of that classroom time in the computer lab that has MAPLE software installed on the computers. Well, we don't have that. And I certainly don't expect you to go buy Maple. It's not cheap software, it's actually fairly expensive. So still looking into exactly what we'll do with that. Even if we were in person, I typically only use Maple 4 or 5 times the entire semester. It's a nice tool. I don't want to compare it too strongly to a calculator because it's much more than that. But it's kind of like how, hey, this calculator can graph, my other calculator could not. That certainly is a tool that this has. Maple has way more tools than even this has. So it's nice software. It's not a computer program, but it has some of those nuances. I'm sure some of you guys, at least some of you, have some experience from Calc 1. If you forget to close a parenthesis, if you put in an extra space, the program doesn't work properly. So there's a few little things. But again, we'll see exactly how we'll work that out. At a minimum, one of my colleagues has made a nice little Maple Lab workbook. So it's just like little notes. It's supposed to be helpful. And it is very self-explanatory, so if you ever needed to use Maple, it's a pretty good guide to get you on track. What are the different functions, how to use it. So I'll definitely at least pass that to you, and we'll see what else we can do. But basically, that 10% is just going to be a nice little bonus for you. And then, of course, we have 30% for the final exam. The final exam is cumulative. It's a daunting task in a regular semester, a tiny bit less so now, but still, it's going to be cumulative from start to end. Everything on our tests and quizzes is fair game for that final exam. Okay, academic integrity policy. We don't have to worry too much about this. Don't cheat. That's really all there is to it. We don't have to worry too much about plagiarism. We're not collecting any papers or anything like that. One thing I do have to mention. Last semester, in person, I always recommend knowing someone in class. I kind of mentioned that a little earlier. Having a buddy in class, so if you do miss a class, having someone you can at least get the notes, get a quick sense, what went on in class, what did I miss, how can I catch up? Even if you can't do too much on your own, but at least get started. So we have other ways to make up for that. But when it comes to working with someone, I think there's a lot of benefit to working with someone else. And it's nice to have someone else to bounce some ideas off of. You get stuck in a problem that maybe they get a little quick help and get back on track, as opposed to having to wait to see me the next day or get to the math help center, whatever the case may be. But now with this online format, and last semester, once we switched to online, I mentioned this, but most people already had someone in the class that they were comfortable with. So trying to make any extra connections through an online environment was a little unnecessary. We'll see how this semester works out. In another week or two, after we get started, get our feet wet a little bit, we could see how things are going. And maybe some of you would appreciate being in, having someone else in class that you could communicate with. And, I don't want to encourage you to actually get together face to face. Who knows exactly how things are going. But if you did choose to wear masks and meet and do a little study session outside, that's entirely your choice. But even more so if you wanted to set up like a little FaceTime phone call with someone while you're studying, while you're preparing. I have no problems with any of that. All that is A-okay, and I actually think is a very good idea and can be very helpful in a tough class like this. But when it comes time to taking your tests, everyone is responsible for their own tests. So 2 big things what I'm saying here. Number 1 should be obvious. If someone fills out the test and does it, you certainly can't give that to somebody else and just scan the same page. That would be so obvious, I would catch that, and that is plagiarism. So let's certainly not do that. But even if you're just working with someone, you should still be working independently. Now, it's one thing to say, hey, buddy, I'm having a little trouble with this problem, and they give you a little hint, and it's an entirely different thing to say, here's what I did, you could just copy it. So we want to really avoid that. Again, there's always going to be issues taking exams in an online format, but let's just try and make them as minimal as possible, giving you a lot of freedom with your exams and quizzes. So let's try and do good by that. Okay. We're getting close to the end with this syllabus, and we're getting fairly close so we can wrap this up and get into the review. So, disabilities, any student who feels he or she may need an accommodation should contact the Office of Special Services and coordinate with me. Again, if that applies, certainly let me know. We'll take care of it. Oftentimes that has to do with a little bit of extra test time and things. With the 24 hours, that probably covers it. But again, anything comes up, you let me know. We'll take care of it. And then the rest, you'll notice, are all of our topics. Everything that we're going to cover, they go through. Basically, we go in order, chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 8, then we make a big jump and go to chapter 11. So, a couple of things here, just a little basic schedule. When we do quizzes and tests, it's not quizzes are half the material and tests are the rest. It's if we cover a small section of material, we have a quiz on it, and if we cover a larger chunk, we take a test. So right off the bat, we're going to start with volume, applications of integration. It's 2 sections. That's going to be a quiz. Then chapter 6 is a whole big chapter with a lot of topics. We get new functions. We got to go through derivatives, basics, pre-calc, anti-derivatives. There's a lot to that. That's a bigger section. Chapter 6 is going to lead to a test. Nothing from chapter 5 would be on that test. The quiz covered chapter 5, and then the test covers chapter 6 separately. Chapter 7, another lengthy chapter, that's another test. Chapter 8 is short, there's a quiz, and then I break up chapter 11. I typically take sections 11.1 through 11.7. That becomes a test, and then 11.8 through 11.10, we finish with one last quiz. So that's why, like I said, it's not set in stone, but 3 tests and 3 quizzes are the typical number that we have in a semester. We may have to make some minor adjustments, but that's basically what I'm looking for. As I said earlier, I would always give you plenty of notice for tests and quizzes as we're going along, as we're approaching, but at least to give you that little bit of a heads up by just looking at the syllabus. Okay. And now the second part of the syllabus, this is where you get more of my information. Again, this was an old one from Calc 1. This is not your actual one that you're being sent, but has a lot of the same basic information. You have my name and email. Those are the 2 that you absolutely need. My phone number and my office, well, I don't think we'll be seeing each other on campus, so that doesn't help. I don't even know if I'll be able to get into my office to check. So again, don't call me this semester. Make sure you send me emails. My office hours are Wednesday, 5 to 8 p.m., but that technically doesn't matter. You can email me anytime you want. Now, when will I get back to you? I pretty much check my email every day, twice a day. So as long as, if you send me an email a little earlier in the day, maybe when I check in the afternoon, I'll see it and I can get back to you then. If you send it more in the afternoon, when I check in the evening, I can get back to you. And if you send it in the evening, probably the next day. So, but basically within 24 hours. So as we keep saying, as long as you're planning and not trying to cram too much at the end, that should be more than enough time to get back any information that you may need. And again, it's not just information, any questions, comments, anything you have. And when it comes to tests or anything, you don't have to hear back from me. We could work things out after the fact, but at least to let me know something's going on. And I realize that's why I'm not getting a test submitted from you or whatever, something like that. Okay, additional notes regarding class. Again, most of these don't apply because we're not in person. no cell phones in class, putting their head down, be asked to leave. That doesn't matter. You're doing this all on your own time. So you get through it as you need to. Make sure you're awake and alert. I would certainly suggest that, but you get through it as you need to. All emails sent to me should be grammatically correct. Well, let's just stop there for one moment. First thing, I am asking you to send me an email. I put it in the email for the first day. I need to hear back from you. It's kind of like taking attendance for the first day. And anytime you send me an email, so I know who you are and what class you're in, always include your full name, no abbreviations please, just so I don't have any issue looking up, finding who you are, and what class you're in. So just always include those two pieces of information in any email. And again, send me an email today after you finish the video, just as your official check-in. And we'll probably have to do that like one other time, just for some bookkeeping purposes. But in general, when you send me emails, as more people tend to use their cell phones for emails, I tend to get more emails in what I call text type. And what I mean by that is that you're really getting to a point that you have your personal contacts and you have your professional contacts. Keep me on the professional side. And all that means, I don't need a whole long email full of fluff, but don't send me text type. Use punctuation. End a sentence with a period or a question mark, so I know you're telling me a statement versus asking me a question. No text type. Hey you, and with the letter U. Again, I don't need fluff, but just a very simple sentence. I don't need the hello professor, what a lovely day we're having today. You can cut right to the chase, but just so I can clearly see what it is that you're asking, so I can get back to you in the best and most efficient way possible. That's all I mean by that. There are no extra credit assignments, okay? Like I said, this is a tough class, but I'm really giving you a blueprint. And I promise you, if you are supposed to be here, you passed Calc 1, you are capable of doing well in Calc 2. No, I'm not promising an A. That's some hard work. There's some real, a lot of nuance that goes into that. A lot of background, can't make little mistakes. That's certainly tough. But I could certainly say you're going to get through. And for the most part, I could say you're going to do pretty well if you stick to the schedule I set, do the homework that I assign, and email me when you have problems. You stick with that and you'll be okay. Okay? So, extra credit assignments. I'm basing your entire grade off of your actual performance and your ability to show me your understanding and your ability to apply the techniques of calculus. That's what your grade is being based off of. There is no extra credit assignment to write me a paper about Isaac Newton. That does not help with your calculus grade. Now, I may have bonus problems or some bonus points here and there, but I just want to be very clear, there's no secret extra credit assignment coming at the end. So if you feel things are not going well, let's talk. Let's not wait to the end. Let's figure it out in the early part. Let's get off to a good start so that way we make sure when we get to the end, you're getting the grade that you want and that you deserve. Okay, a few more notes on grading. The MAPLE assignments will be conducted in class. Well, we're not in class, so like I said, that's where you're basically just getting a free 10% there. At least 3 exams and multiple quizzes announced at least a week ahead of time. Like I said, it's probably going to be 3 of each. And, we'll see how that goes. But I really think, I'm very confident we should definitely get 3 of each. It's actually just possible we may have to just shift things a little bit. Maybe we do smaller quizzes here or there. That's why I'm not setting that in stone. We'll see exactly how we go. Failure to contact the instructor with good reasoning regarding missed quizzes and tests results in a 0. I'm very serious about that. Same thing in an in-person class. If you miss a class, a regular day-to-day class, if you want to let me know what's going on, that's up to you. You don't have to feel, again, you had a doctor's appointment or it was just, you didn't feel like making it, whatever the reason is, forever good or bad, missing a regular day-to-day class is your business. And again, you can certainly tell me in all situations as much or as little as you want, but that's certainly your business. But when it's time for a test or a quiz, if we have a test that day and you miss, now I have to know what's going on. That's the day that it really matters. So that's the same in this online format. If there's a due date, and again, you know something, you've got something else conflicting with that, let me know. We'll make easy accommodations, no problem. But on top of that, emergencies happen. Things change in that moment. So again, just stay in contact with me and we could still make things work. So if you send me an emergency email that night, something came up, even if you don't hear back from me, as long as I have your email, we'll be okay. All right. Attendance, there's a few notes on schedule. We do have a few off days here and there, but I'll make note as we go week to week. Some days, like, we don't have class on a Monday, so we'd only have a Wednesday class. That'll be a lighter week. And I'll even point out when those things are coming up. Sometimes those are good weeks if you fall behind a little bit to try and catch up, or if you want to get ahead a little bit. Again, QCC Sponza, even if they're not posted on Blackboard, I still have videos on YouTube in advance ready for the next week. So if you ever want to peek ahead a little bit, you could feel free to do that. And I also had a note about winter travel. And even though this is fall semester, we've still have had some crazy days in November and December. But again, we're doing this from home, so that really doesn't apply. So I just want to end on this note, everybody. You still have your review video. So again, I've already addressed that you definitely want to come into this class prepared. Not that you have to remember everything from Calc 1, but you want to have some good remember a few of the big details, getting your brain working in the mode of calculus again. So make sure you go through the review video, make sure you look through the review pack that I attached. And again, we'll get, even once we start with regular class, we still start a little slow in that we still get a little bit of a nice reminder on some sections. We don't just jump in with 2 feet right off the bat. You certainly don't have to remember everything from calculus. A lot of the pieces I'm reminding you of don't come up in the first couple of weeks. They come up like U substitutions. You see in the review video, I will make a lot of emphasis on U substitutions. It's not going to come up right off the bat in Calc 2, but it's going to be used a lot in Calc 2. Same thing with the trig functions. We don't see them at all in Chapter 5, but then we start seeing them a lot in Chapter 6, and a lot more in Chapter 7. So like I said, just to make sure we're getting off to a right track. But the last note, everybody, I want to recognize that this is still a very troubling time. We're still in the middle of a pandemic. There's still a lot of unrest with, just everything that's going on. So I always want you to always feel comfortable letting me know what's happening, but especially in a semester like this. Things come up, things may change as we're going along. You may have had a perfect schedule set up, but then things change with your work or things change with your responsibilities because, if you have kids or younger siblings that are going to school, they have plans for in-person. Will that last the whole year? Who knows? But if things change, we want to be able to continue to be flexible, and I want to continue to be flexible with you. So always feel free. Please let me know. Comment, give me questions, let me know what's going on. Let's have a good semester, everybody. And now here's the last part, everybody. To prove to me that you watched this whole video, and I thank you for sticking with the whole thing, but to prove to me you get your first little opportunity. Not extra credit, but bonus. If you send me that email to confirm your name and your class so I can mark you off on my attendance sheet, if you include the message, "The Yankees win," you will get 2 bonus points on your first quiz. Okay? So again, just in case you don't follow baseball and couldn't quite hear what I said, I want to show you the message is "The Yankees win." Include that in your email for 2 bonus points. So don't forget the review video, everybody, and you'll get another email and more videos from me next week. Let's have a good semester, everybody.